Sen de ekranda bir bozukluk varsa görebilirsin. Evet.
I had a good job and a life in a series.
Hello everyone. Thank you very much for patiently waiting for us to start the program. Today I had some problem with YouTube, no need to know, but it seemed like as if our broadcasting wasn't coming to the right scale on the window, but we tried to overcome various ways and eventually we realized it's just a glitch. We think it is not, but as you see the screen is okay, everything is fine, there is no problem. Without further ado, I would like to introduce my co-host, guest, my conversation partner, Behzad Fatmi. Behzad, welcome again.
Thank you so much. Ismail, how are
Thank you
you?
very much. It is 4th of February. In this Hizmet Talks program, we're going to talk a few issues. The original idea was to talk about whether Hizmet Movement is a cult or not, and partly because you have elaborated on this topic recently on an Urdu video in Urdu language. And let's start with you. I have framed it as self-identification purely for not being, let's say, scaremongering, because sometimes the way I put the titles, people get offended. But anyway, yeah. So, is the Gulen movement a cult? What is your opinion? You should know about cults and religious movements. You're coming from a fertile land where there is so many religious movements. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. True. Yeah. So, of course, this question often comes to me as a participant of the Hizmet movement, a volunteer of the Hizmet movement. People ask this whether the Hizmet movement or the Gulen movement is a cult. Now, of course, such accusations have also been made mainstream by the Turkish media. The Turkish media is accusing his movement, has been accusing his movement of being a cult. Recently, uh, in the aftermath of the 2016 so-called coup attempt in Turkey, the TRT also made a video accusing the movement of being a cult. So this is a widely asked question. Let me put it this way. So to analyze or determine whether any religious organization, a religious movement is a cult or not, I think we have to understand what a cult is normally. So there are three criteria that I think can be mostly analyzed, considered to analyze or determine whether any religious movement is a cult or not. One, deviancy. If the movement is deviant or not, that is the first criteria that you can look at. Second is if the movement or any religious organization has any unorthodox means of control. And the third, the presence of charismatic leadership, and the and from where this charisma is coming from. So these are the three criteria that I think can be used to determine whether a social movement or religious movement is a cult or not. So in this case, if we talk about the first one, the deviancy, what do I mean by this? What is meant by this is we have to see whether the organization, the movement we are talking about, is it anyhow promoting values or thoughts or ideas that are different from the mainstream thought. So let's say we're talking about a Islamic cult. So what we will see in them is that they will have some views that are not mainstream, that are not the mainstream Islamic views. For example, uh, let's say somebody is claiming to be a messiah, somebody is claiming to be Mehdi. This is, or somebody is claiming to be the last prophet of Islam. So this is deviancy from the mainstream Islamic belief, isn't it? I mean, in mainstream Islamic belief, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may peace be upon him, is the last prophet of Islam, and therefore nobody else can claim to be the prophet of Islam anymore. But if somebody is claiming is having such a claim, then you can say that it is deviant. There is deviancy in this movement, and therefore you can categorize it as a cult. Uh, Secondly, talking about the unorthodox means of control. So in cults, you will see that they often use unorthodox measures, or they use abusive abuse actually to control their members. Uh, you know, you see that there's often news and incidents of sexual abuse in cults, and there are other methods to use to control the members of the cult. So what a cult does really is try and control their members and make sure that they do not have a view other than the larger organization or of the movement. So whether or not the Hizmet movement, is there any things of that kind in the Hizmet movement? And the third, the presence of charismatic leadership. So based on, and this charismatic leadership based on some divine claim. For example, uh, there are in cults, you would see that there are a charismatic leader, or there is a charismatic leader who derives his charisma from his divine claims. For example, claiming to be the prophet, claiming to be Mehdi, claiming to be Messiah. If there is something, is there something like that in the Hizmet movement too? So these are the three things that I just briefly explained. How you, I mean, the criteria that you can look at while analyzing whether a movement is a cult or not. So, is there deviancy in the Hizmet movement? Does the Hizmet movement also have any claim of any divine stature? I think no, absolutely nothing. The leader of the Hizmet movement is a human being like any one of us. He is a he's Islamic scholar. He is a person who makes no such claim of being Mehdi or Messiah, or God forbid. There's no such claim in the Hizmet movement. There's no the Hizmet movement as an organization, as a social movement, believes in the fundamental values of Islam. It believes in the does everything while taking inspiration from Islam. So this is what we call what we claim to be, right. That the Hizmet movement is the genius of Hizmet movement is that it takes inspiration from Islam. It is religiously inspired, but uh, it is neutral. It's neutral in its manifestation. So it doesn't, whatever it does, it takes inspiration from the religion most of the members of the Hizmet movement believe in. And while in its activities, it embraces everyone. So there is absolutely no evidence of any deviancy in the Hizmet movement. Whatever the mainstream Islamic thought or values or belief is, Hizmet movement believes in it. So this is number one. Yeah.
I think that's a way to describe that, but there is sure other ways of explaining that. And for instance, if you were to take it down to three criteria deviancy, yes, the movement is definitely very mainstream Sunni Islamic version of the existing Islamic version. In fact, the strength of it is that it is very much founded on traditional Turkish Islam. Hence, if it has any problems, that's probably because of that as well in other forms. But there are, of course, specific forms of interpretation that are emerging within the movement because of, again, their own experience. For instance, that they have been under secular regime for a very long time. Hizmet movement, so many people are used to hide their identities, and up to recent times, we used to criticize that maybe the movement people should be more open and obvious about their affiliations, but it seems like the secular government of Turkey was already keeping a tab on it, and they considered that as a threat, so they used those sort of identification against them. But I mean, charismatic leadership is a problem. But whenever I come a problem as like, yeah, Gulen is not claiming that he is anything special, and he's not exercising too much power within the movement. But there is a lot of clout around him created within the movement that used to justify things which wouldn't be justifiable. Like, for instance, people would think, okay, if Gulen wants us to do this, okay, let's do that, sort of an approach. When I come across this question, I always like look in a couple of directions. One is a close circle within the movement, a small amount of people who are really, really attracted to Gulen's ideas, personality, his way of interpreting Islam. At some point, it mixes up whatever they are really, really happy to see, or whatever really they are impressed. But it mixes up. Eventually, it becomes the personality. So there is, in my opinion, a cult in the center of the movement. A cult is a derogatory term often used, so in that sense, I would say maybe a new religious movement. So where people actually try to understand their interpretation by looking at how Gulen interpreted it, and often his interpretation doesn't is not challenged very well. I think he is not lucky enough to Imam Azam Abu Hanife, who has challenging students, which made his products very, very fruitful. In fact, in some cases, his students would expect him to expand on or interpret his own sayings or his own expressions. But then I have to remember that the movement is not this, let's say, less than 1% people who happen to know Gulen. Most of the people, when we talk about Gulen movement, is actually people who get to know the movement by his books, by his ideas, never met him in person. Although they might like him, but there isn't a real direct, let's say, personal relationship, which doesn't allow that sort of a charismatic influence to, steer it out of the original direction. So I would say there is a sense of that, and the other thing is the one of the things people look at it is that whether you can criticize the leadership or the movement leadership or the leader himself. or whether he's bound by principles. This is one of the things that new religious movements and cults are actually failing. So I would say criticizing or accounting Gulen is not as especially holding him to account is not especially very popular within the movement, but criticizing is not as much, especially after the coup attempt. There has been an increase of criticism. There has been call for, let's say, resignation, calling off the entire mission, shutting down all activities. So there has been extreme level of criticism in every form, and there is also more minor criticism in the, like whether smaller criticism, but there is definitely a reason is still there in majority, and I think it is in the increase. In a small minority, as I mentioned before, maybe it is still there is this absolute faith on Gulen, but the mass majority of the movement, in comparison to 10 years ago, in my opinion, is much more rational, much more critical, and much more identifying themselves the way they would like to. I don't know. So this is my observation. I wasn't as prepared as I would expect, but I think this topic would require maybe another round of more technical look at, because it's often debated and discussed in a different form, and I have had this difficulty of today getting the system work, so my thoughts are not as composed.
No, I understand that. So here, I think it is important to make a distinction between charisma and cult or being cultish. So there's no doubt that Fethullah Gulen is a charismatic leader. He is seen as a charismatic leader, but just because he's seen as a charismatic leader, we can't say that the Hizmet movement is a cult. What is important to see here or observe here is Gulen is seen as a charismatic leader. He has that charisma because of the enormous amount of the vast knowledge that he has of Islam and of science, of the way he is an inspirational figure for the whole world. He coming from a small town in the eastern part of Turkey, starting a movement which is now present in over 160 countries, and a movement which at its peak before at least the coup attempt in Turkey was running at least 2,000 schools worldwide, and a similar number of dialogue institutions and businesses. So a person who has inspired a movement as big as the Hizmet movement, I think there is a charisma attached to him, but that charisma is because of his knowledge, because of what he has achieved in this life, not because in his life, not because he has a divine claim as such. He doesn't claim to be Mahdi, and nobody, I think, in his right mind in the Hizmet movement would claim that Gulen is Mahdi or has any divine stature. He is a human being, who was born in 1938 and someday will die as anybody else. But it's just that as sympathizers, we can always pray as we pray for our parents, for our elders, that may they live long. But there's no denying the fact that one day, like everybody else, Gulen will also pass away. So I think this is important distinction to make, that charisma doesn't necessarily make. Having a charismatic leader doesn't necessarily make a movement cultish.
Um, I would say yes to that to an extent. Again, for me, I can't deny entirely, because there is that aspect, that enormous charisma, let's say, of the previous experience, of the things that he has done or achieved throughout his life, has created that cloud around him, and a lot of people are respecting and expecting much more than a human of him. So there is that problem of, you may not enforce a cult to your followers, but the followers may also instigate a cult around you. I would say maybe same things happen to, in a way, Gandhi or Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, that you may be as down to earth as possible, but people then start putting you up in a very high place where you are revered as almost demigod, semigod, or even your humanity comes in. Well, he's as human, but he achieved so much. I know a lot of people considers, well, not a lot in comparison, but a lot of people has this understanding that he's got more qualities than a normal human. He's very clever, very, like always proven right, and this and that. So that takes precedence. You can see that who can see that people take, like they might be overwhelmed, and people have a tendency to take everything to Gulen and try to resolve it in there, or people expect their problems to be taken up and sorted by Gulen rather than sorting them individually. However, this, in terms of the movement, the relationship between the movement and the person, that's why I identified this topic as a self-identification or self-autonomy issue, or personal autonomy. During this period, especially since the coup attempt, since 2016 in Turkey, we've realized that actually a lot of people have power to engage or disengage with the movement. I think this is a very important factor we need to remember. I mean, the numbers, the estimated numbers were millions, like 3 to 6 million were mentioned that were his follower base. Now we can see it is down to, let's say, 500,000 to maybe 300,000 people directly accused of being member of Gulen organization, and a lot of people during this period who were abroad, who didn't have any sort of a reason to denounce their relationship. You can see the way they see the movement is heading, or the way they dislike the discussions within the movement. They can easily declare that they are no longer in part. They can actually abstain going into meetings. There isn't that sort of a peer pressure or almost forcing people to stay in, sort of like, the famous cases might be against the Scientology and others. But people can actually go in and out. One thing is, it's very hard to prove that you're in. I think that is one other thing that works against this claim, is many people who are trying to prove that they are from the movement in the European countries, when they are applying for asylum. During that application, they have this difficulty to prove that they are within the movement, because it is almost non-existent. There isn't a sense of idea. So they have to come up with the Turkish government defined criteria that puts them into that category. The rest is a lifestyle. You pray, you attend sohbets, you support activities, and that is the affiliation. More or less, you do it more or less, but that is the affiliation. There isn't anything specifically which say, well, this is how I dress, or this is my ID, or this is how I identify. So I think that is also important. There is also what I observed recently. This is why I'm the person who instigated that rumors or that debate within this maybe dilemma. I didn't instigate in the form of that the way pro-government outlets did, but I am open to discuss that there is a part within the movement is inclined, or even in fact, like if you were to go and observe Gulen's close circle, his relationship with the student, And if you don't have any background in traditional madrasa education, why the students sit on the floor and Gulen sit on a chair and this and that, you might easily say, well, this is not the way we are used to in the Western world, or so this is dodgy. But actually, that is a lot different in there. There is a lot of other stuff that indicates otherwise. Again, there is a lot of things designed around Gulen and his comfort, because he's an old man. Where he sits, he has a massage machine and this and that. You can see and understand some of it. And more importantly, there is this cloud within his close circle who are following him 40 to 50 years. He has a very, very huge amount of trust in him. And I think that has always the danger of expanding its sphere and influencing more people. But since 2016, I have seen a very strong sense of criticism, sense of rationalizing, sense of taking responsibility of your own action, defining your own relationship with the movement. In fact, in today's world, it is very easy to observe that people actually not only define their relationship, but they also choose how they want to participate, how much they want to participate, in which activities they want to participate. And that has important role as well. I don't know whether you want to add anything to this, or shall we continue? Yeah.
Just a few points, maybe. You know, if we look at these, the way Gulen sits in with his students, right, while teaching Quran and fiqh, that's what he fiqh and tafsir, the classes that he takes at his residence in Pennsylvania. The setting, of course, looking from the Western point of view, you would say that this isn't about being equal, and there's a high stature for the teacher, and the students are sitting on flow. But we also have to not dismiss where Gulen is coming from and where his students mostly originate from. Are they not mostly from Turkey? And Turkey is an Eastern country where this, as you said, the madrasa culture, the way students and teachers sit in madrasa, that is the culture there. So and this is very common in the eastern part of the world. It's there everywhere. It's there in India. It's there in Pakistan, and I'm sure in all the Arab countries too. So and also there is in India, for example, there is this great amount of respect that a student is supposed to have for teachers. The student the student and guru relationship. That is what guru is teacher. So that relationship is supposed to be very strong, and students are expected to be very, very respectful of the teachers. But we don't necessarily see that in the West. So we can't judge the practices in the Hizmet movement, or the practices that Gulen focuses on. The practices that Gulen undertake in his classes from the Western point of view. It would be unfair to say. I mean, can we talk about, for example, can we judge what happened 200 years ago by today's moral standards? We can't do that, can we? It's there. The circumstances at that time were different, and therefore there were different kind of things that happened and people used to do many centuries ago, 2 centuries ago, or five centuries ago, 10 centuries ago. So it's there are criticisms, a lot of criticisms against the Prophet, for example. Isn't it that the way he for example, his marriage with Hazrat Aisha, that they say that he married her too early in her life. But B is that's the B, and also the numbers of many marriages that he did in his life. So there are people who criticize it. So this is today's morals, today's ethics, today's values, and we cannot judge something that happened 1400 years ago with these values, the values of today. And therefore, and likewise, I think we cannot judge a movement that originated in Turkey with the standards of the UK or the US, and therefore it is and the respect, the strong respect that his students, his contemporaries, his friends have for him because of his knowledge, because of what he has achieved in this world, cannot be simply cannot dismiss it, because that's what we don't do in the West. And we really have to understand that. But however, having said this, I think I agree with you by saying that in just because it happens in the East, we can't say everything that happens in the East is okay and we shouldn't be talking about it. The Hizmet movement is now more global than it was, and since it has presence in over 160 countries, there are certain values that it needs to adopt. uh, for example, in the East, we give a lot of importance to individuals, don't we? In India, for example, Gandhi, uh, the title given to him of Mahatma. Mahatma means of great, Mahatma means in Hindi great. So the great Gandhi, a lot of people just think
I thought it
that
was
that's
his
his
name.
name, but that is, yeah, yeah, Mahatma is just a title given to him. His name is Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, but Mahatma is the title that was given to him. So, here I would just like to add that his great grandson, Tushar Gandhi, disagrees with this. He doesn't like this title Mahatma given to his great grandfather. He says that he was a human being. He had his own, you know, um, uh, drawback, and we shouldn't put him on a pedestal. That it becomes totally I mean, and that we start revering him or start somehow seeing him as something supernatural. He was a human being. So anyway, this is what happens in the East. We give a lot of importance to individuals, not to institutions. And here, I think if there is a certain element of truth in this too, that in the Hizmet movement too, we give a lot of importance to individuals. We give a lot of importance to Fethullah Gulen, and but this isn't a healthy situation to be in. In this contemporary world, being present in over 160 countries makes the expectations a lot from you a lot higher for people. So the institution building within the Hizmet movement also needs to be emphasized on. We need to more focus on it, and I think since the coup attempt in Turkey, there is at least more debate around this issue, and hopefully in the coming days this this issue should be addressed.
Yeah, in that case, I want to show a picture, maybe. It might be useful. Here is one interview area, for instance. I just want to emphasize a little bit of what I was trying to say, because it has the positive and negative, that interaction of the individual, how he chooses to interact with the movement. And sometimes it has positive and sometimes it has negative directions it may take. So this is, like I think you guys can see now, this is the where generally he sits. So there is in every setting probably where he sits, there is his seat and there is some sofas on the side. And then what you can see is that normally people, there is a limited amount of sofa on around. And often the students of Gulen goes in there, who are regular there, goes in there first. I give a positive example how, let's say, rationalizing increases, but I would now give a negative example, that how actually, if the balance is not careful, how one aspect can dominate, let's say, a more cultish behavior. So because students often go in earlier and they are regular there and they are practicing sitting on the floor more often, they often sit on the floor as regular people so that the guests can sit on the sofas. So they are keeping those sofas empty for the guests. I know this because of the practice of the madrasa culture, that how you treat guests in there and the students make way for them. But when the guests come into the room and see that Gulen is sitting in the main chair, I found on the main chair here, and his students who are regular, who shows the way how to behave in there, are sitting on the floor. So they tend to sit on the floor as well, as if that is prescribed. So many people who think that they are not actually, they're not well enough to sit, their knees are hurting earlier. Some people really have difficulty, they can't get up, because if you're not used to sit on your knees for half an hour, it can be really painful, it can numb your legs as well. So just because they follow who is already there sitting on the floor, students who actually left the seats for the guests, but guests tend to follow the students and they create this ambience in a way that it is desired or it is wanted to be in that way. So that sort of a interaction, I think, so
But there,
that
uh, there's an important point to make here. Uh, One thing that if when an important guest, when if for somebody who is really a guest who has come to meet Gulen, we also know, I myself have witnessed it while visiting him at least, I think three times. He Gulen himself would stand up for and leave his chair for the guest that is coming in. He would offer his own seat to the guest. So he does it. It's not just that. I mean, he himself does it, but talking about the students, yeah, they sit there. But whenever Gulen sees a guest, somebody who is not a frequent visitor to his place, he often gets up and offers his own seat and insists. I have seen myself that he insisted, my guest that I took from India, insisted on him sitting on his
well,
chair.
isn't that
And
another way of saying that this chair is important and who sits there is important? I can see that how it can go both ways. That's all I'm emphasizing here, because then you can see, okay, people associate he's got back problems, so he's got that massage machine working because he teaches from that chair and from the other chair in the big room, let's say. So he's got that. So almost it is because there is that massage apparat in there, that little thing behind his back. Everyone knows that it is his chair. Almost it becomes position, and then people start taking their position accordingly. For instance, let's say this is a private room, but in the main room, if you were to sit there and since there is some massage machine, let me work it and get how people would react it. That's what I'm saying. Like that sort of reaction, and if people would say, well, that is not your spot, that is a specific spot, then it is the tendency to go, let's say, mysticism starts at that point. Yeah, that's all I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, again, this is the central point of the movement, where very very few people come into see this or being affected. It's not really affecting a lot of people's understanding of Gulen. But on the other hand, you can see that there is a potential that, especially in this sort of difficult traumatic times, if people are uh, pushed and tortured and left hopeless and in despair, they might look for any sort of validation they can see. And you can see that Gulen had to have to respond some of that, like by talking every week, trying to be hopeful and giving positive messages about the future and stuff. Anyway, so but in my opinion, it's a balance. Like you see, I have seen huge structures have changed within the Hizmet movement recently, after 2016. That being, like, for instance, the way the fundraisings are changed, the way decision makings are changed, the practice of let's say moving people around has changed. The practice of management is in changing in a lot of ways, and even the debates become in 95% of the Hizmet circles that you can observe. You can see debates become more realistic, more rational, more let's say thought provoking, rather than like there was a sense before that everyone has a share to do. I just do my share without questioning, but it's not the case anymore. But I want to talk I want to take a moment and talk about what's happening in Turkey, in Boğaziçi University, the incidents there before we close the program. From abroad, what do you see? How do you perceive what's happening in, what did you hear so far about the Boğaziçi University? There is a huge protest going on there, and students are protesting a new vice chair. It says, yeah, it's strange. In the UK, it's called vice chair, but in Turkey, it is almost an absolute chair. Someone who is in charge of every.
No, I think in the UK it's called vice chancellor. It's not
Yeah,
vice
sorry, yeah,
chair.
vice
It's
chancellor.
vice
But
chancellor.
in the UK, often there is a chancellor of a university, but he is like a figurehead. So he doesn't hold any power.
True.
Often a celebrity, a lord, or a real royalty, just to push image of the university a bit forward. The real position of power is vice chancellor's seat. But in Turkey, that is the seat of, let's say, chancellor that has all the power, or there is one absolute point. There isn't a figurehead at all. In fact, actually, there is a point to make here. I don't know whether you know about this, but the Turkish university system is, with similar to other institutions, have been designed to be managed and manipulated or directly connected to state bureaucracy. Like many institutions in Turkey, you can have a head. Your head would be in a higher council of something where they can be in indirect contact with the state. So, for instance, every institution, like for instance, judges and prosecutors hire council, yeah, that manages all the affairs down there. It's a military regime product. So, for instance, all the universities have chancellors, but they all belong to higher university board, where all the management is done, and their head is also, like someone often appointed by the government. And I think recently, I wasn't aware this much. I thought until now there was like the university chooses 3 candidates. People vote for 3 candidates, and then the president chooses one of them. But recently, I think presidents start appointing, with the change of law, start appointing almost vice regents to the universities, and Melih Bulu is one of them, apparently coming to the most prestigious university with a with a record of plagiarism. Yeah,
Plagiarism.
And of course, I heard that even his Instagram account is a fake one that he bought from someone. It's a recent news. But what do you know? What do you hear about that?
So yes, of course, protests in Boğaziçi University have been going on for some weeks now, and it was sparked off by the appointment of a new rector by the president of Turkey, and of course, which is totally not the norm at the university. Of course, as you just mentioned, that usually university used to elect a member, elect the rector from its own faculty, but this time a political person, a person who is the member, who is a member of the AKP, the ruling AKP, has been appointed as the rector of that prestigious university. So here, I mean, of course, Erdogan, it isn't unlawful. In 2016, this power was given to the president, that the president can, if he wishes, can appoint a rector. So it's not illegal as such, but it is it's not the norm. It's not legitimate. We can contest that at least. So of course, this and students have been protesting also because we have to understand here that the events at Boğaziçi University. Boğaziçi University is not the first university being targeted in Turkey. It is a very important point to make here. In the aftermath of the 2016 coup attempt, 15 universities affiliated with the Gülen movement, the Hizmet movement, have been shut down. They were taken over and they have been shut down. And even before that, even before the coup attempt in early 2016, thousands of academics were dismissed from their jobs because they signed a petition calling the government to, uh, to end the fighting with the Kurds, the violence, the fighting with the Kurdish militants, the PKK. They called for peace, and thousands of them were persecuted just for calling for peace. So this is this government, the government in Turkey, is anti-intellectual, and it has been for quite some time. The president's degree is questionable. He's there's no clear evidence of him going to a university and attending whatever course, but he claims to have a university degree. So it is anti-intellectual, and such things, they have been trying to they have been cracking down against freedom of expression in Turkey, and which means that they have jailed journalists, and they have likewise purged and persecuted and jailed academics. And this is finally they have come to Boğaziçi University. But of course, Boğaziçi University was relatively unaffected till now. In 2016, when the purges, the dismissal of academics was happening after the petition calling for peace, Boğaziçi was untouched, and even after the coup attempt, it wasn't as targeted. But now finally, it was looming. Everybody was expecting that one day or the other, this government will try to do something at the Boğaziçi University as well. The Western inclination of this university, Western leaning of this university, is not favorably viewed by a lot of AKP supporters. So it was an expected move. One day it had to happen, and today it's happening.
So you think
But
it was
also
inevitable in a way?
it was inevitable in a way. I mean, as I said, Boğaziçi's university is not the first university in Turkey that is being targeted, that has been targeted by the AKP. 15 universities have already been shut down. I know a lot of academics who were working. There's a friend of mine who was doing his doctorate, who was pursuing his doctorate at Bilkent University in Turkey, and he was dismissed for his
PhD studies.
affiliation. Yeah, he was pursuing PhD, and he was dismissed for his affiliation with the Hizmet movement.
Yeah.
And so many of my friends, I myself worked at Mevlana University in Turkey, and just because I know a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, Bekir, I'm forgetting his name. I'm forgetting his surname. Bekir Görmez. Yeah, Bekir Görmez. We know his story. He was in jail, and his son, his child passes away, and he was brought to the cemetery with his handcuffs on. He was praying with his with handcuffs on his hand. So this is what we saw. I myself have have so many friends who are victim of Erdogan's crackdown on university. And so Boğaziçi University isn't the first one being targeted. We have to understand that. And it is also important for those protesting the government at Boğaziçi University. They also must acknowledge the fact that they are not the first ones being targeted. If they really want if they really want to successfully resist this government, they have to acknowledge that they're not the first ones. Many others have been victimized by this government, and they should lend their voice to those victims too. Just because even if you are liberal today, you have to come out and lend your voice to the Hizmet volunteers who have been persecuted.
Yeah.
If you really want your protest or resistance to be successful. Otherwise, it's just that you are talking about yourself. When it comes to you, you protest, and otherwise you don't.
I think
But
I
this isn't
think that
fair.
is a learning curve, isn't it? Like when the Hizmet movement had this when the movement started having these difficulties in 2013, 2014. In those years, I used to talk some Alevite friends, and they used to say, "Well, these people have been always oppressive, you know. Welcome to reality, you know. Are you just now saying this now, sort of?" And I can see that many people feel that way. Well, oppression about academic freedom was an issue in Turkey since the coup attempt anyway, and before maybe a little, but after that massively, and this is just an extension. Well, that's unfortunate, you know, that it goes along and just takes on a small society of the a small group within the society, and then manages to isolate them from the wider group and crushes them. And one can say that Erdogan used the terror charges against the Hizmet movement, so it was easier. And now I can observe in the news, actually, when you look at the news as in general, you can see the highlight is generally about LGBT community and almost what's happening in Boğaziçi University is about some LGBT youth is protesting against it. I think this is a narrative a bit forced by the government. There is a wider community, but they are specifically making on a section of the protesters that they can easily ostracize by using the existing homophobic thought within the Turkey just by feeding into it. And a little bit of terrorism already came in with recent uh, domestic minister Süleyman Soylu and Erdogan was talking about how terrorists are trying to take over the vice or the chancellor's office in the university and this and that, claiming it's not a proper student wouldn't do that. But you can also see that they can consolidate almost a fight against elitism, or let's say the white Turks or secular Turks, or people who are disrespectful towards Islam. I can see that, for instance, it can be easily propagated in the UK to wider Muslim community as well. These people have disrespected the Kaaba, you know, with their artwork and whatever, as if that was like the whole purpose of the issue. And Erdogan is very good at doing that, and it seems like they are going to work on that narrative a bit more, because somehow he might be finding this a bit useful to polarize the community and consolidate his support behind him.
Mm-hmm. We have to agree that Erdogan knows his people. You know, he knows the country, and he knows that most of the people in Turkey are homophobic. You know, he knows that a lot of people would fall for any narrative that some of the liberal protesters have insulted the Kaaba. So this is what he has used, hasn't he? In his entire political career, he knew that a lot of people in Turkey are have an antipathy for the Kemalists, for the liberals for what happened during the Kemalist regime in Turkey, and he used it for his own benefit. He always continuously would say that, see, if we go from power, if we are ousted, same people will come back again, and they will again ban hijabi women from going to university. So this fear in the people's mind, he is using it. But using this fear, he himself actually targeted and persecuted so many of hijabi women in Turkey. More than 17,000 of them are in jail. 17,000 women are in jail today in Turkey with their babies, hasn't it?
Yeah,
Isn't it?
mainly because of and
Erdogan,
mainly because of their religious affiliation. Like people can go to
yes,
prison, but these people specifically gone to prison because of their religious affiliation, not for anything they have done.
yeah, exactly. So I mean, there are people who who were a woman was simply jailed because she was making some food items and selling it to help some of the victims of the purge. So Erdogan has done it using that fear. He is consolidating his voters, but he is actually taking similar actions in his own uh, under his own watch. I mean, he's doing it himself. So this is what he's trying to do at Boğaziçi University as well. I mean, this protest has been going on for weeks, as I said, but just because a group of LGBT students protested, and he has brought it to zeroed in on them, saying that, see, these people are protesting, and therefore they are insulting Kaaba because they portrayed, make a drawing with Kaaba and with the pride flag. So he is using it to discredit the whole protest movement against his
And probably
his
provoke it
political
as well,
appointment.
isn't it?
So
And probably,
it is, of course, yeah.
yeah.
Exactly. And the good thing is, at least, that we saw a, a club at Boğaziçi University, which Muslim students, right, the Müslüman öğrenciler, they came out with a statement saying that we also do not approve of this vice chancellor, this rector, because this is the narrative that he's trying to create. That, see, actually, we have appointed a person, a religious Muslim, a conservative person, as a rector to Boğaziçi University, but the liberals, the LGBT people are protesting it. It's only them who are protesting, not the Muslim ones. But it was a very good move by the Muslim students, I think, to come out with a statement saying that we also disagree with Erdogan's move. So yeah, I mean, we have to say that we have to agree that Erdogan knows his people so well. He knows the country so well, and and it is the reason, that is why he brought in this narrative that these people have insulted, the protesters have insulted Kaaba, and LGBTQ people are only protesting against this appointment.
I think it's fair to say that there are some campaigns by Amnesty and other organizations that are trying to draw some attention to this problem at the moment, to this growing problem. It's almost same problem is like the securitization of a small civil issue and turning into and pretending as if it is a terror issue, terrorist related activity, and trying to ostracize them from the community and maybe punish them. And whilst probably all this is going on and catching the attention of the international media as well as domestic media and dividing people, maybe people are missing out other important issues, like last week there was this big debate about the cooking oil prices and how the government had to intervene to start selling cheaper oil, cooking oil, to ease the visible symptoms of the economic depression. Anyway, I think that brings us exactly 59 minutes 35 seconds. And if there isn't any other message that you want to pass, we are just gonna end the program here, and we'll see you next week. We'll discuss some other topics. The viewers are more than welcome to offer any issues they may want to, so we can discuss those issues either by Twitter or via comments. I've seen there is a couple of comments that agrees with our discussion, says that is it possible that Erdogan is just using the same structure which allowed Kemalist elitism to lead in Turkey? I don't think it's about ideology, either the headscarf or Islam. Yeah, I think it is mainly almost using the same footsteps to just become more authoritarian. I think a very similar incident would be in Republican history the incident of Kubilai. So like there was a small incident of a murder of an officer. The history tells us that was some fanatics did that, Islamist fanatics and whatever, and Mustafa Kemal took a huge amount of radical response to it, to crush that, to make an example out of it, and to also advance his let's say westernization, modernization via westernization strategy. Anyway, Behzad, Fatmi, thank you very much. Behzad also have his own YouTube channel. You can find that description down below. He makes English and Urdu comments in there about the Hizmet movement and about the politics. Please follow him as well, and see you next week.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.